Good evening, everyone. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for watching Gravitas here on WION. On tonight's program, we take a look at what role the United States will have, if any, when it comes to solving the India-Pakistan problem. Our second discussion tonight will focus on the deadly Syria gas attack, where 58 people have died. But first, let's take a look at the other top stories making headlines around the world. At least 58 people have died in a suspected chemical attack in Syria's rebel-held Idlib, just outside of Aleppo. Young children are seen suffocating to death in a chilling video released by activists. Leaders all over the world express shock, concern, and despair as images of young children are targeted in the chemical attack in Syria. EU leaders say peace talks are needed. Exiled Tibetan spiritual leader the Dalai Lama reaches India's state of Arunachal Pradesh ahead of his visit to Taiwan. This as India rejects China's charge of escalating tensions between the two countries. And no thank you, says India, as it refuses the United States' offer of intervening in India-Pakistan talks and asks Washington to ensure that Pakistan ends the proxy war, destabilizing the region. And 24 hours after a bombing in Russia's St. Petersburg, investigators now release the image of the key suspect. They identify him as a 22-year-old Kyrgyzstan-born Russian. His name is Abkurzon Zhizhalov. The death toll now climbs to 14. Those stories shortly, but the big discussion tonight, trumping for Kashmir. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, well, she made comments when it comes to India and Pakistan's frosty relationship and the U.S.'s role. Haley hinted that U.S. President Donald Trump may get involved in a peace deal between the rival South Asian countries. Haley, who is of Indian origin, didn't specifically mention Kashmir, but she did say that the United States is concerned about the state of relations between the neighbors. This comes even as India opposed any external involvement when it comes to dealing with neighbor Pakistan. During Donald Trump's campaign last year, Trump offered to help mediate, but only if the countries wanted him to do so. But this is the first high-level Trump administration statement when it comes to India and Pakistan's frosty relationship.
That we don't think the people want. Right, and this administration is concerned about the relationship between India and Pakistan and very much wants to see how we de-escalate any sort of conflict going forward. So I would expect that the administration is going to be in talks and try and find its place to be a part of that. But I also wouldn't be surprised if the president participates in that as well. We don't think we should wait until something happens. We very much think that we should be proactive in the way that we're seeing tensions rise and conflicts start to bubble up, and so we want to see if we can be a part of that.
All right, to get perspective on this story, we're joined from the United States by Glenn Karl, a former intelligence officer. We're also joined by Joel Whittaker, security analyst, our correspondents Taha Siddiqui and Ramesh Ramachandran to get perspective on this discussion. Let's first start with Glenn joining us from the United States. Glenn, great to have you again with us with regards to this. Is it too early to speculate what role the United States may have, if any, when it comes to what Nikki Haley has said between the two neighbors here in South Asia?
Well, I wouldn't spend too much time, if I were an Indian diplomat or official, worrying about what the Americans will do based on Nikki Haley's statement. I think it's clear to me, anyway, that what we have is an amateur, talented though she may be, at the United Nations for the United States, and largely an incompetent, ignorant person in the White House. We don't have a policy, and they haven't paid any attention, the United States, to India, to Pakistan, or to Indian-Pakistan relations. Clearly, Haley was trying to say that she wanted America to be engaged and constructive, but did so in a way that ignored the decades of American policy and Indian reactions and Pakistani reactions, which is that the United States has no policy, takes no position on what is an Indian-Pakistani issue. The State Department independently has reiterated that position, but of course the State Department is locked out and largely impotent now. So here we have an example of a White House that doesn't have a policy, someone trying to sound constructive based on no guidance and one flippant comment during the campaign. That's largely it. And they don't realize, I'm afraid, the power of any statement by an American official. President Johnson famously said 50 years ago that when he sneezes, the global stock exchanges catch colds. And this is the power of the United States, even still, which our leaders, I'm afraid, don't seem to grasp the nuances of.
All right, let me go to our next guest. We also have Conwell Sanderson, former ambassador to the United States, joining us. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. My question to you is, Nikki Haley was asked this question by a Pakistani journalist, this from the United Nations. So is this really being blown out of context? Your thoughts?
No, I don't think it's been blown out of context, because question was asked about U.S. possibility of doing something between India and Pakistan to resolve their differences. And she gave what to my mind is a totally unacceptable answer and an illiterate answer. I'm afraid she's not yet fully au fait with the complexities of India-Pakistan relations and the sensitivity of our own position as the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan. I think she's a bit of a loose cannon, and she's not particularly well briefed. At the moment, there is no South Asia department functioning in the Department of State, so there is nobody to really guide her on these issues. And even in the Trump administration, I don't think at the moment they are focusing on this issue, which for the time being is quite peripheral to the larger U.S. concerns. And therefore, she's saying what came to her mind impulsively, and because of her lack of experience and knowledge, she's making a big faux pas, not only on this issue. If you look at what she's saying on Russia, she's telling that President Trump is beating up on Russia. Look at the kind of language she uses. And she's been actually contradicting what Trump has been trying to say, that he would like to have some kind of an engagement with Russia. And she is, in fact, taking a very hardline position against Russia, and has publicly said that she differs with President Trump on Russia. So I'm afraid she's losing her credibility, and if she goes down the road, she will actually add to the complications of India-US relationship unnecessarily. And finally, I would say that this is not a policy decision. This is an off-the-cuff reply to a question by a Pakistani. And she may have actually had in mind what Trump said to Nawaz Sharif when they had a conversation, which was a warm conversation, and which he also indirectly hinted that he may wish to play a role. So she may be actually ad-libbing on that basis of that statement, which was an ill-considered statement. So I'm afraid she's adding to the confusion in India-US relations on a very sensitive issue, and that also in advance of our Prime Minister's visit to United States. But I think this issue will get cleared up. And Trump has said publicly that he doesn't want to intervene abroad and this and that and that. So why would he then want to intervene in what is a minefield, which is the India-Pakistan relationship? This would be totally contrary to his interests. And what I also don't like about Nikki Haley's statement is that she's equating India and Pakistan, as if the problem that is created and the tensions that have been created is the responsibility of both countries. It is Pakistan who's been sponsoring terrorism against India. If they stop sponsoring terrorism, there'll be no tensions and there'll be no risk of escalation.
Let me now go to Joel Whittaker is a security analyst who typically has dealt with conflict zones. Joel, the comments that Nikki Haley is making, it certainly seems like something that just sort of came out of the blue. Does it seem like her stance has possibly changed? She was very critical of Donald Trump earlier on, the former South Carolina governor. She's got this new position as the ambassador to the United Nations, and could she possibly have her own agenda? She is of Indian origin, but we haven't typically seen her take on too many issues related to India. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. I think it remains to be seen if the US actually want to really get involved in the India and Pakistan issue. The administration seems to be a lot more active currently, certainly verbally, than the last administration in matters of Asia and the Middle East. It's early days yet as to whether there's any sort of teeth involved in this, or if it's just early talk.
All right, let's go to our correspondents as well. We're standing by, both Ramesh Ramachandran as well as Taha Siddiqui. You guys have extensively covered this topic back and forth, India and Pakistan. It's certainly not a newsroom if we don't have that kind of discussion. Let me start with Ramesh, first of all. We've certainly seen the string of situations that have taken place between the two South Asian neighbors. How is this being perceived in India when it comes to Nikki Haley's comments and the Trump administration? Certainly India snubbing the United States, basically saying, don't meddle in our affairs.
Indeed, Archit, thank you. I want to make a couple of quick points before I come to your question. Archit, Ambassador Sibal used the word illiterate. I wouldn't go that far, but I will certainly use the word inexperience. Because remember, I was reading somewhere that she passed up on the opportunity to become Secretary of State because she claimed to not have the requisite experience. So in this case, I think her comments betray her inexperience. That said, some would dismiss her comments as being gratuitous and unsolicited. Now, coming to the Indian government's position, the Indian government's position has been consistent always. They've set 3 ground rules. 1, that talks will have to be, peace talks will happen, number 1. Number 2, it has to be bilateral, no third-party mediation. And 3, terror and talks cannot go hand in hand, and Pakistan needs to dismantle the infrastructure of terrorism operating on its soil and targeted specifically against India. Now, that said, today we saw the Indian Foreign Ministry issue a statement reacting to Nikki Haley's comments and saying that, 1, the government's position is that the bilateral redressal, which should be in an environment free of terror, number 1. Number 2, India expects the world to enforce international mechanisms concerning terrorism emanating from Pakistan, number 2. And finally, number 3, Pakistan terror is the single biggest threat to peace and stability. Archit?
Quite an interesting perspective there, indeed. Let me go to Taha now to get the Pakistani perspective. Taha, how is all of this being played out in Pakistan, if at all, with regards to this? We also just heard from from Mr. Sabal with regards to Pakistan and state-sponsored terrorism. How is this being played out there? Taha, go ahead. All right, we're having some technical issues with Taha. We'll come back to Taha in just a moment. Let me now go back to Glenn Karl. Glenn, your thoughts with regards to the whole the snub that India has basically given the United States, basically saying, we can deal with this on our own. They really do not want the United States, at least it's meddling in the affairs of India and Pakistan. Your thoughts with regards to that, Glenn?
It's serious. Yes, hello.
Yes, go ahead.
India has experienced civil servants and a coherent policy. One can agree with the policy, try to change it or not, but that's secondary. It is competent and rich. So India should treat these comments in a way that protects Indian interests and with the superficiality that they deserve, frankly. I'd like to make a comparison here. There is a consistency. I'm half being ironic in the Trump foreign policy approach. Let me compare Haley's comment to that of Donald Trump when he met with Benjamin Netanyahu concerning the peace process or the lack thereof in Israel. And Trump said off the cuff, semi-flippantly, as he always speaks, that he would support a one-state solution, a two-state solution, or whatever anybody wanted, thereby jettisoning 50 years of American foreign policy, not by intent, but out of ignorance and superficiality. The comment is similar by Nikki Haley. This is a government which has virtually no policies and no competence. I also, one other point to show where this is coming from, I think the ambassador spoke to it very well. I briefed years ago a political appointee on the peace process. And I said, well, the issues with the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, which is one of the founding terrorist groups that led to al-Qaeda, fundamental knowledge that one should have as a senior counterterrorism official, did the following. And my political appointee responded, what is that? knowing nothing. Similarly, Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law and apparently the master of all issues on the globe now, when being briefed on the Middle East issues, interrupted his briefer and said, what is the PKK, which is the Kurdish terrorist or Kurdish nationalist group.
Right.
So we're dealing with this level of incompetence.
All right, let me now go back to Mr. Sibal with regards to President Obama. Former U.S. President Obama said something very similar to this, but he backed off. Do we believe that this is sort of a replay of the same situation when it comes to India and Pakistan, Mr. Sibal?
No. First of all, that came at the level of the president, and it was therefore a policy decision, or at least a policy initiative. And they were testing the waters. And India made its position very clear that if they were going to give the responsibility to Mr. Holbrooke of dealing with India as part of the AFPAC situation, then he was not welcome, and that he will not be received in India, and that Holbrooke should limit himself to the AFPAC situation. Here, it is just Nikki Haley who's saying this, and she's only the ambassador to the UN. It's not a policy statement by the government. It's an unfortunate statement, and I would again repeat that she's illiterate in India-Pakistan affairs. And maybe because of her Indian origin background, she felt that she had to say something which would suggest that she was even-handed. I don't know. This is perhaps a psychological issue. But this is not a policy statement, and therefore I will not compare what she said with what initially President Obama wanted to do and backed off. But I might also add that President Bush himself stayed away from India-Pakistan issues because after the Simla agreement, both sides have agreed that this issue will be dealt with bilaterally, and we've held on to that position. But let me also add that the fact that we don't want the United States to act as an honest broker or to intervene in the issue does not mean that the United States is not in a position to make démarches to us, which they do. And which is not really intervention or mediation, it's simply diplomatic work. There's nothing that stops the United States as a global power with regional interests to talk to us about what their perspective is about Pakistan and about the situation in the Indian subcontinent. That is normal in diplomacy.
Right.
And then we have to brief them on what our thinking is. So long as this is done privately without the United States coming forward to say that they are going to mediate and this and that, which raises all sorts of other complex issues. And finally, as I said, and I would repeat, that it will be totally unacceptable to India if India and Pakistan are equated in any way, because the source of the problem is terrorism from Pakistan. And if they give up terrorism, I can honestly tell you, the dialogue will start and we can move towards normalization of relations. But so long as they use the instrument of terror against us, this will not happen.
All right, well, let's continue this discussion, but a quick perspective when it comes to all of this. It isn't really clear at this point if Haley was acting on specific instructions from Trump and the administration. During the election campaign, Trump did offer to mediate between India and Pakistan, but as we mentioned, only if both India and Pakistan wanted that. Now, if there were any raised eyebrows in Haley's other remarks, well, perhaps she would have raised them earlier. So let's also take a look at some of the U.S. presidents in the past or White House officials who made comments when it comes to India and Pakistan's relationship. Well, since the Clinton years, American presidents, whether they're Democrat or Republican, have generally been supportive of India. U.S. presidents in India, President Clinton intervened during the Kargil War to get the Pakistanis to vacate the areas they had occupied in Kashmir. President George Bush pushed the civil nuclear deal that transformed the India-U.S. relationship. President Barack Obama visited India twice, built a personal equation with Prime Minister Modi, and kicked off a defense partnership that now awaits a boost from Trump. So given this perspective, let me go to Ramesh Ramachandran joining us from the newsroom. Why are American presidents, Ramesh, in your opinion, why are they so fascinated with the whole India-Pakistan equation? What is their agenda?
Archit, if I can just quickly go back to what Ambassador Sibal referred to a short while ago. He spoke about the AFPAC policy under the Obama administration. Now, I can immediately draw another parallel, and I hope Ambassador Sibal will bear me out on this. In 2009, we saw the Obama administration issue a joint statement with Chinese President Hu Jintao when he visited Beijing, and they talked about a South Asian condominium whereby both could, ask for better relations between India and Pakistan. That figured in the joint statement, actually, and India did not take kindly to that. So immediately I can draw parallels between what happened today and what happened in 2009. And that, I think, betrays the inexperience of when a new administration comes in, and these are early days for both, for Trump, and it was early days even then for Obama. So I guess they need to time to sort of, as Ambassador Sibal said, to learn, understand the nuances of India-Pakistan relations, and then maybe take it up from there. But that said, Archit, it's time the international community actually called Pakistan's bluff. That's my opinion. It's America eventually that needs to take a call on that. But Pakistan, cannot be seen to be any more running with the hare and hunting with the hounds. And for the US part, they need to stop, swinging from hyphenating India-Pakistan to dehyphenating and back to hyphenation. So I guess US needs to get a grip on its South Asia policy as well going forward. Archit?
All right, Ramesh, thanks for those updates. Let's see if we get Taha Siddiqui, our correspondent in Pakistan, joining us right now to get the Pakistani perspective on this. Hopefully the connection is a little bit better. Taha, let me go to you. How is this all being played out in Pakistan when it comes to the comments that Nikki Haley made when it comes to both the relationship of India and Pakistan?
Well, as far as the Foreign Office is concerned, I tried contacting them earlier and spoke to the spokesperson here, but he doesn't really. They did not want to release an official statement, and it's probably because of the fact that the Indian side, the Ministry of External Affairs on the Indian side, has already issued a statement saying that they reject any such proposal from the Americans. Also, at the same time, unofficially, or for example, from commentators on TV, this has been running throughout the day here on the Pakistani media, and it has been being run and is being perceived here as a positive statement, a positive development. And commentators who are thought to be close to the military, close to the establishment, are seeing this as a welcome move, because there was a lot of fear amongst the Pakistani lawmakers, legislators, and the authority here that because of the closeness that the Trump administration will have or already has with India, Pakistan will probably be cornered and pushed. And already we do know that there is sort of an anti-Muslim country sort of policies from the United States. So given all of that context, this particular development is being looked upon as a positive development that Pakistan is welcoming. As far as unofficially we're getting to hear from policy circles.
All right, I also want to get a perspective from the former ambassador again. Certainly the situation with India and Pakistan, at least over the last few years, have certainly escalated with what happened last year in Pathankot, what happened in Uri, the surgical strikes, and specifically a lot of it boiling down to Kashmir. How much do we believe, does Nikki Haley and the United States really understand the complication and the complexity of Kashmir? Mr. Sibal, go ahead.
Know how much understanding Nikki Haley has. After all, she was the governor of South Carolina, and she hasn't dealt with India-Pakistan affairs, and she's new to diplomacy, and she won't know even the kind of history that you have narrated about the positions of the previous presidents and the ups and downs in India-US relations in the past on this issue. So she needs to learn about this, and she'll probably have an occasion to do that during her tenure in the UN. Therefore, I think she's not very well acquainted with the complexities of India-Pakistan relations and the Kashmir issue. It's had a long history, right from 1947. And unfortunately, the US position on this issue has been negative from India's point of view. And even today, there is not enough clarity on this issue, though after the Indo-US nuclear deal and the transformation of our relationship, as you mentioned, United States has now taken a position which we can live with, that this is an issue which should be settled between India and Pakistan on a bilateral basis. Earlier, they used to add that they are willing to help if both sides want it, but they have omitted saying that, which is a good thing. So long as they go back to this position, which means if the Trump administration goes back to this position, we can live with it, even though by saying this, they are not putting enough pressure on Pakistan actually to stop meddling in Jammu and Kashmir through terrorism and raising tensions, which compels India to react. And then the international community becomes worried because both are nuclear weapon states, and they start raising the specter of a nuclear war, potentially a nuclear war in the subcontinent. But this is not fair.
Right.
The thing is, they must address the terrorism issue. And since Trump is very, very forceful on this issue, we would expect him actually then to do something with regard to Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism, at least in Afghanistan. If he begins from there, it will have a salutary effect on Pakistan with regard to terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir and in India generally.
All right, let me go to Glenn Karl real quick. Glenn, you know, with regards to the Trump administration, how it's being perceived, especially with Donald Trump and now Nikki Haley, do they really understand the complexity when it comes to India and Pakistan's problems, specifically Kashmir? I mean, how well-versed are they, or are these just bold statements sort of coming out to sort of appease? I mean, this question was posed by a reporter to Nikki Haley, so did this just sort of stumble out?
Stumble out, I think, is well put. I think the ambassador and Joel and all of us who have spoken, who are professionals in this, there is benefit to being a professional in a given discipline, are appalled at this and dismiss it, would like to be able to dismiss it as meaningless, ignorant filler, except that we have senior American officials. I'd like to make a point that hasn't come up that I'm afraid probably should almost terrify all of us. There's a deeper issue at play here than ostensible American positions towards the Indian-Pakistan Kashmir issue. And that is there is a coherent approach by the few Bush officials there are, which is being guided by concepts of the deep state and hostility to professionalism, the elites, and government. I'm not overstating the case. Steve Bannon, the Svengali of Donald Trump, has a coherent view, and it is based on the fathers of Italian fascism in the 1930s. I am not engaging in hyperbole, which dismisses as enemies of the people bureaucrats, civil servant, and the government. The Trump administration, to the extent it exists, has made clear it will not fill thousands of positions for professionals throughout the government, especially in the State Department, and that it views as enemies of the people, essentially, a civil servant and a professional diplomat like myself or the ambassador.
Right.
And so therefore what you have are policies that will only be based upon visceral and largely ignorant positions that should frighten us all.
All right, we're going to get quick closing thoughts from all of our panelists with regards to this discussion as we wind it up. Let me first start with Joel Whittaker. Joel, quick closing thoughts when it comes to Trump, Haley, and the whole India-Pakistan issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'd echo the last guest's comments. It's a worrying look ahead, I feel, with such rhetoric that is sprouted so quickly and so easily. And obviously, the power that the US is, the effects that will be felt because of the rhetoric that's sort of spilled out are quite critical. So I think it'll be quite an interesting times looking ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for your updates. Ramesh Ramachandran, closing thoughts.
Well, Archit, it surely betrays our inexperience, for one. And two, India's consistent position has been that the talks will have to be bilateral between India and Pakistan, no third-party mediation. But that said, if there has to be any U.S. role whatsoever, then it has to be to the extent that U.S. will get Pakistan to dismantle its infrastructure of terrorism operating on its soil, and especially that which is directed against India.
All right, Ramesh, thank you for those updates. Taha, quick response and closing thoughts.
As far as right now, this is kind of being taken as I mentioned earlier, that as a positive development in Pakistan. But given the fact that the Foreign Office is silent, so as of yet, no major breakthrough is expected unless the Foreign Office does issue an official statement with regards to this. But we've already seen that India has rejected that. So Pakistan, there shouldn't be much expectation going further from Pakistan from this.
All right, let's go back to our ambassador, Mr. Conwell Sanderson. Real quick closing comments.
I would say that the saving grace in all this is that President Trump has no time for the United Nations. He said so. They're going to actually reduce the budgetary contribution of the United States. I suppose he's put Nikki Haley in that position because he doesn't think that is going to give much importance to what she does there and to the UN in general. And therefore, I think Nikki Haley will not be able to do much with regard to mischief in India-US relationship on Pakistan-related issues.
All right, we appreciate all of our panelists. Thank you so much for your discussion. A quick short break here on Gravitas. We're going to be right back with more discussions about the deadly Syrian gas attack. Stay with us here on WION.